college football podcast, joined as always by Clinton Boring. My name is Ryan Satkowiak, and we are officially in the last week, the last Monday of a week that does not have college football until late January. We are almost there, guys. We are almost there. Tonight we are continuing our fall preview series, our last week of our fall preview series. We only got 3 of these left. Boy, time flies when you're having fun. Tonight we are joined by Brendan Moore of Spartans Illustrated as we talk Michigan State this evening. First and foremost, Brendan, we appreciate you taking some time for us this evening. How are you doing tonight?
Doing good, fellas. Really appreciate you guys for having me on.
And Mr. Clinton, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing great, man. As we kind of talked about pre-show, Ryan and I have been on this seltzer water kick, and my wife bought tangerine, and that's a pretty pungent flavor. I don't know how I'm feeling about this so far, but it's wearing on my taste buds. But otherwise, I've been waiting all day to say this. This is Sparta! I cannot wait to talk some Michigan State football tonight, and excited to have Brendan on here with us.
Are you sure you haven't been waiting like 6 weeks to say that?
That's why I tweeted it out today. I love that line, man. That's a great movie.
It's an all-timer. It's an all-timer. Listen, man, I am fully on the fizzy water train. I had 5 beers on Saturday. We had some friends over, and I was hungover at 11 p.m. It was awful. I couldn't sleep. So that's where I am at in my life. We are once again live on YouTube this evening, and we plan on being live on YouTube indefinitely here as we get finish up this preview series. We have our college fantasy show on Thursday, full week for you, and then we get back into our regular programming this week. You can find us on that YouTube channel at ITPCFB. That is the same place you can find us on Twitter and Instagram as well. Give us a follow, subscribe to that YouTube channel so you can interact with the show. And if you would prefer to just listen to us in the morning on your commute or when you're making your breakfast or pretending to work from your work from home job, that was an at my girlfriend. I don't think she actually listens to the show. You can find us in your podcast feed, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your shows. We are at Inside the Pylon there. If I was thinking, Clinton, I would have just clipped that audio. That would have just played it intermittently throughout this episode. Before we get into the 5 burning questions tonight, Brennan, I just want to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself to the listeners and just kind of talk about your time covering Michigan State and any relevant information from your career beforehand.
Yeah, I've been covering Michigan State for Spartans Illustrated going on to my 3rd football season now, so a little bit of experience under my belt. So excited for this kind of first year Jonathan Smith, and we'll get into it a little bit. But yeah, been covering Michigan State for a few years now, actually going into my senior year of college. So I still got that to finish up, and then looking forward to covering this football season here.
You've seen some stuff in 3 years there then, my friend. Holy smokes. That's yeah, I guess that's a good enough segue into question number 1 here. I mean, I don't even know if tumultuous is a strong enough adjective to describe what happened for Michigan State last year. To recap, anyone who was evidently caught under a rock and did not catch what happened in East Lansing last year, Mel Tucker was fired after 2 games, and then I believe 2-0 at the time. They'd gotten off to, granted, we weren't talking about, playing the cream of the crop competition or anything, but after a 2-0 start, Mel Tucker was fired for non-football related reasons. We do not have to rehash all that tonight, but defensive backs coach Harlan Barnett took over and guided the team to a 2-8 finish. Now leading the helm for the Spartans is former Oregon State head coach Jonathan Smith, who orchestrated a phenomenal turnaround with the Oregon State program and Oregon State alumni, and then left that team when it was clear that the whole Oregon State program was going to kind of get left out in the cold here. And unfortunately for them, they're still kind of just hanging out in limbo. But for Michigan State, Brendan, what does Smith bring to this Michigan State program, and what has he already been able to kind of change to help get this football program back on track?
Yeah, how I kind of view it is Jonathan Smith's kind of a return to kind of the hard-nosed, underdog mentality type of football that Michigan State fans are used to seeing from the likes of Mark D'Antonio, who's probably one of the most successful coaches in Michigan State history. He kind of thrived on that hard-nosed football. Might not have the most talent on the field. We're going to outwork you. We're going to beat you up physically. So, yeah, I think Smith kind of – I think there's an element of that with Smith, what he did at Oregon State. I think he's going to carry that over to Michigan State. So I think it's kind of a return to what Michigan State's identity really should be. Because I do think Mel Tucker got away from that a little bit. He tried to do his own thing, which I give him credit for a little bit. Going out of the box and trying different things, being super flashy with all those supercars and stuff on recruiting visits. But yeah, I think Michigan State, I think Jonathan Smith kind of represents a return to what Michigan State football was in its prime back in the 2010s under Mark D'Antonio.
Those are some days, man. Mark D'Antonio, and then Brendan, if you don't know, I reside in Columbus, and there were some quite thorn in the side times of Mark D'Antonio with Ohio State that caused a lot of stress in Ohio State fans. Most notably the Big Ten championship loss, and then the one I don't remember the name of the kicker. Yeah, and then maybe the kicker,
Michael Geiger,
that ran down the field. Yep, after he nailed that one. What a stressful time it was here in C-Bus. A lot of tension flaring there. But well, that kind of Ryan, do you have any other thoughts on Mel Tucker before, so I can forget these memories?
You mean Mark D'Antonio?
Yeah. Or even Jonathan Smith coming onto the team.
No, I just think it's funny that Michigan State is once again being coached by a John Smith.
Because kind of a full circle thing.
Yeah, John. I have some fond memories of John L. Smith just slapping himself in press conferences, and he was a goofy guy. I hope he's doing well these days. But no, I'm a big fan of Jonathan Smith as a coach. Mm-hmm. He, that's Oregon State was, I feel like, traditionally one of those places that teams would look at as, even in a power conference, it's not exactly the easiest place to win at. And the turnaround there, he orchestrated both in what he was able to achieve in the recruiting rankings, and Michigan State's already reaping some of the benefits with it, and that we'll get into here in a minute with some of the guys he brought in the portal. But the way, again, that he was able to kind of utilize the transfer portal as well, and I'm looking at that quarterback position last year with DJU, who, say what you will about him, but I mean, just more than serviceable college quarterback. So I'm fascinated to see how that kind of carries over into East Lansing, and for a program that, I mean, it really hasn't been long since they tasted success. I mean, we're only 2 years removed from when they were on top of the football world here.
That was a wild time, because if you remember 2020, the year before, they went like 2-5 in that COVID year. 2019 was kind of underwhelming as well. That was the last year D'Antonio. They made a bowl game, but still not really up to expectations of what a Mark D'Antonio team should be. So they were kind of like off the national radar, like totally going into that 2021 season. That they popped that 11-2 season with the Peach Bowl win. So it was a wild 2021 was just a wild season. It was just kind of out of the blue. Here's an 11-2 year, and then back to reality the following year.
And Brendan, if you could provide just a little bit of insight, Michigan State is very well known for the basketball program. Tom Izzo, living legend, basketball legend, love the guy. Do you think at all, just in time, and maybe not in the Smith process, but does it affect coaches when they come into a program like that that's a little more basketball dominant and they feel like they have to be second fiddle to that?
I think it actually pushes them to be even better than they already are, because they know the legend that is Izzo, and athletic departments, different coaches, they kind of push each other. Like you see this kind of like South Carolina, a place like South Carolina, like Dawn Staley is doing incredible things with that women's basketball team. She's pushing, Shane Beamer, the football coach, men's basketball program's been doing good. So you see this kind of in athletic departments, just different coaches inspiring other coaches, and they constantly build on that success. But I don't think Michigan State's as basketball dominant as many people think. I think it's a football school, personally. I think it's a football school that just happens to be really damn good at basketball. So that's just how I see it. Michigan State, very passionate about football, fans. The fans are. So, but also they're passionate about basketball. So it's kind of a two-sport school, really.
And I just bring that up because obviously Ohio State had to go through a coaching hire for basketball this year, and just a lot of the talk was like, you got to be second fiddle to the program, and does that affect coaching hires? So I was just kind of curious how that plays at a school like Michigan State, just to see if there was as much of a difference.
Yeah, Smith was once he got hired. I saw him at many Michigan State basketball games throughout like January, February. So he's talked to Izzo before. Kind of started to build that relationship. So he's really embracing that he has a legend on campus like Tom Izzo. Michigan State's athletics, just even from hockey to the women's soccer and some of the other sports, have been doing really well. So I think that can kind of carry into football, hopefully.
Certainly.
It's always good when you have that healthy relationship and not the one that whatever the hell John Calipari and Mark Stoops had. That was a little weird. And now Cal's at a school where he doesn't really have to worry about the football team because they kind of stink.
And then Sam Pittman's going to get canned after about 3 weeks. So, no, it was always fun as a kid through part of my life. Not necessarily a kid. I'm getting old here. More of my adulthood, seeing D'Antonio and Izzo's relationship. That was a lot of fun to see, and how they kind of bonded. And I think something you look for between your two major sport programs, I would say.
Yeah, those
So
two are
kind of
very similar. Like D'Antonio Izzo, just the way they coach, both they love their players, but they're also stubborn, kind of that tough love type of thing. So yeah.
So now we kind of spin into question 2 here, where Clinton made his wonderful error that the unfortunately the listeners or watchers of YouTube won't see. So the question, now properly worded, was: the Spartan offense was a bit of an eyesore in 2023. The passing game finished with a PFF grade of 59.2, which was the 4th lowest in the Power 5. They averaged 199.8 yards passing per game and 89.2 rushing yards per game. They now bring in Aiden Childs, who comes with Jonathan Smith from Oregon State, to lead the quarterback room after what a carousel they had in 2023. Can you let the listeners know what Aiden Childs brings to this offense and how much we can expect the passing game to improve this year?
Yeah, so I want you guys to think back. Think of what your prototypical Michigan State quarterback looks like. Kirk Cousins, Brian Lewerke, Connor Cook. They're typically your pocket passers, not the most athletic. I think Childs kind of breaks that mold. I think he's the most athletic quarterback that Michigan State's had on campus since I can remember. So he brings that element, that he can extend plays with his legs, can throw on the run better than a lot of Michigan State quarterbacks in the past. Now, I do think there needs to be a little bit of pessimism in terms of he's never started a game before, right? We're kind of basing this on that he's going to pan out, which we don't know for sure. He's got the talent. We'll see. This is his team. There's no doubt he's going to start this year. So as to how much they're going to improve, I do think the passing game will take a step forward. I think it's big for those receivers to have, hopefully there's no injuries, but have one starting quarterback the entire season. Because if you remember last year, they had 3 different starting quarterbacks: Noah Kim, Keaton Hauser, and Sam Levitt. All have since transferred. So just the receivers, the tight ends, developing that chemistry throughout the year with Childs, with a consistent number 1 quarterback. I think that single-handedly is going to improve the passing game and just improve that chemistry, improve that consistency.
Before we continue this conversation, Clinton, I want to play a game. I will Venmo you an additional $5 on top of the money I already owe you for the Purdue game. If you can guess, when Brendan said your typical Michigan State quarterback, if you can guess the first name that popped into my head.
Mine was Kirk Cousins.
That was not mine.
Yours?
That was not mine.
What was it?
Drew Stanton.
Oh, wow.
He said prototypical Michigan State quarterback, and I almost just blurted out, Drew Stanton! But, I mean, the theme fits, and Aiden Childs certainly is not that. I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there, because I think we see a lot of these conversations, and we kind of had this conversation last week when we were talking about Dylan Raiola. The favorite thing for the college football fan, and I guess really any sport fan in general, is the mystery box, the unknown prospect, because when we look at that, we only think the good that it could be. We see, oh man, he's a high 4-star prospect, and he's got all these physical tools, and God, that's just going to translate so well. And you never think about kind of the downside of that. And that certainly feels like Aiden Childs this year. Is boy, does he have every tool in the toolbox that you could possibly want in a dual threat quarterback who can stretch the defense both horizontally. Did I say that right? Yeah. Side to side, sideline to sideline with his legs, but also over the top with his arm strength. But it's just something that we haven't seen. And particularly with the quote unquote Big Ten style of play. And granted, that might be a thing of the past, given how the conference has kind of morphed here this offseason. But I'm really fascinated to see how he is able to kind of utilize that skill set, and how Jonathan Smith's able to bring the good parts of that out of him while minimizing what certainly will be mistakes when we're talking about a true sophomore who with minimal playing experience at this level.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. And there's also the element, well, he's a dual threat. He's going to use his legs. What if they rely a little too much on his legs? Because this offensive line is a question mark. How I see it, I think offensive line's a question mark. So his child's going to try to do too much as a true sophomore quarterback. Is he going to run into issues where he's getting beat up because he's running the ball a little too much? Again, even just sophomore mistakes and just inexperience. So there's still, while he's got all the tools in the toolbox, right? There's still a lot that that we need to see on the field before declaring him as, oh, he's this next great Michigan State quarterback, and he's going to be one of the greatest of all time in Michigan State program history. So there's still a long way to go. Got all the tools, so we'll see.
Well, we mentioned the three previous quarterbacks from last year transferred out. If something were to go awry, and fingers crossed it doesn't, Childs gets hurt, what's in the cupboard behind him?
Yeah, I think Michigan State picked up kind of a reliable backup in Tommy Schuster. And if you don't know who he is, transferred in from North Dakota. He's a local product. So he's coming back to his home state. And he was really reliable. He's an all-time leading passer at North Dakota, who's a very decent FCS program, made the FCS playoffs, I think, a couple of times there. So did really good at North Dakota, doesn't make a ton of mistakes. And he's not the tallest kid. He's not the most athletic kid, but the guy's reliable. The guy's not going to make dumb mistakes. So Childs got a little bit of immaturity, maybe a little bit of inexperience there, but behind him, you got a guy in Tommy Schuster, who can coach him up, has that experience. So I think the pairing of those two, obviously, hopefully it doesn't get to Schuster. Hopefully Childs is healthy all year, but I think having Schuster in that room is so critical, because behind Schuster, there's two true freshmen. So if Schuster wasn't there, then you got a really inexperienced quarterback room.
Who are some, if we're just kind of looking at the offense as a whole, ignoring the line for a second, but looking at kind of the skill position guys, and I guess this kind of we'll transition here into question number 3, given that Jonathan Smith has been the architect of pretty good offensive attacks here at Oregon State over the past 2 seasons. What should we expect from Noah Carter in 2024, and who are some other names to know in both at the running back and wide receiver position to kind of help supplement this offensive attack?
Yeah.
And that's meant Nate Carter, not Noah. I can't read. I'm sorry. Jesus.
Oh, good. Yeah. So Carter last year at running back, he was kind of a one-man show. I mean, he was relied upon very heavily last year. So I think you'll see a healthier Carter, a more efficient Carter when he's on the field. And also I think you're going to see him involved a little bit more in the receiving game. I think he had a little over 100 last year. I would expect that to be around 200-300. I think they're trying to get him the ball a little bit more in space. And behind Carter, they brought in the guy from the spring transfer portal window, Ron Lynch-Adams, transfer from UMass. I think he had over 1,000 yards last year. So experienced at UMass, played a little bit at Rutgers as well. So has that Big Ten experience. So Carter and bringing Lynch-Adams in, I think the mix of those two, I think Carter will not be relied on as heavily, so he'll be a little bit fresher when he's actually in the game. I think those two are really solid guys. I think what numbers they're going to get this year, we'll see. I think Carter, my best guess is he'll hover around kind of that 800 range, maybe 200-300 receiving yards. Lynch-Adams maybe about 400-500 yards. We'll see. And at wideout, I mean, you got Montori Foster coming back. He's a solid guy, veteran guy in that receiving room. But if you don't know the name Nick Marsh, he's a true freshman, but already looks like a senior. Like his body, he's ready. Like he's 6'3", I think a little under 210. So physically, he does not look like a true freshman. He's been making plays all spring, been making plays fall camp here. So if there's a receiver, a skill player to watch on this team, I think it's true freshman Nick Marsh.
And obviously what's going to play a key factor in that, Ryan alluded to it briefly at the start of the question, is the offensive line. You've already brought this up. What can we expect from this offensive line in 2024? What changes have they made to help improve it?
Yeah, I have serious questions about the depth of the offensive line. Look, I mean, they lost a couple of guys to the NFL or to graduation. Nick Samak got drafted. He was the center last year. There's 2 notable guys that they brought in from the transfer portal. Tanner Miller, who was an all Pac-12 guy last year. He's going to play center this year. Luke Newman from Holy Cross was like all Patriot League. So we've been hearing good things about him. He played tackle at Holy Cross, but he's shifting into guard for Michigan State. Okay. Like there's a little bit of positional versatility there. Smith likes that positional versatility, being able to play multiple positions, adds kind of that depth there. So Newman can play tackle, but will play guard, looks like, for Michigan State. So that center guard combo, I do think, will be reliable. As for the rest of the offensive line, I have questions. I kind of figure Brandon Baldwin's probably going to start at left tackle. A couple other names that'll start, but the depth is a real big concern. I just don't think they have the amount of bodies that they need, the amount of experienced bodies that they need to really take a big step forward. Now, I do think they do have a really good offensive line coach, also serves as the run game coordinator. Jim Mahalchik comes over from Oregon State. So I do think there'll be a slight improvement on the offensive line, but again, it's a big question to me. I don't think they'll make a leaps and bounds, a huge jump forward here.
And we kind of mentioned receivers, but left out Jack. Is it Jack Veiling?
Jack Veiling.
What is his impact on Jack Veiling? What's his impact going to be coming over as a pretty good tight end from Oregon State, and how he kind of fits? And he obviously is going to aid Childs in the receiving game.
Yeah, he already knows the scheme. Already knows Childs really well. So he's going to be a big help at tight end. He's going to be probably the top tight end on the team. Solid blocker, also good with his hands. Moves really well for his size. So I like Velling. I think he's probably going to be one of the top tight ends in the Big Ten, if not the country. So he's another skill player that you guys need to watch out for. So Velling, I do think he brings kind of that. I don't want to say veteran leadership, but he brings kind of that familiarity with the scheme. And I think that really helped Michigan State kind of install the scheme, and he's been helping a lot of the other guys kind of try and learn it.
How do you view, and I get the question of this might be, it depends. In what way can they kind of vary the scheme, given that you do have that mobility at quarterback and you do have a pretty good versatile running back? How do you see them, at least early in the season, while the offensive line is getting its kind of sea legs under it, kind of varying up how they call the game to utilize the strengths that they have to maybe cover for some weaknesses in that offensive line?
Yeah, like you said, I do think they need to cover a lot of those weaknesses. I don't think they have the exact roster they want. Obviously, it's year one, so still a lot of time to build. But yeah, from what Brian Lindgren, offensive coordinator, from what he did at Oregon State, I do think he's going to bring kind of a creative play calling more so than what we saw last year, years prior with Michigan State. I think he'll scheme up plays for Velling. He'll scheme up plays for especially some of those speedy slot receivers, a guy like Alante Brown, Isaiah Johnson, who are probably the two fastest guys on the team. And we saw last year with Oregon State, Silas Bolden was a stud for them. He's small, but super quick. And now he transferred to Texas. So I think you'll see Lindgren in this offense be creative, because they kind of have to be, right? With this offensive line question marks, they kind of have to be creative. They have to scheme open guys, whether that be creating matchup problems in the secondary, points of confusion there. So it'll be interesting to see what Lindgren does. Kind of how he schemes up this offense.
Now, moving on to question 4, unless Clinton, you had anything else you wanted to touch on the offense here?
No, I was just watching and making sure you were alive.
Oh yeah, I'm dual tasking here. I have a dead dog over my right shoulder here. She's we threw the ball a little too hard with her in the backyard this afternoon. But moving on to the defense here for question 4, Brennan, I'm a big Joe Rossi fan. I really like the work that he did at Minnesota. And even though they were a little bit down last year, he's consistently had some of the best defenses in the conference, let alone the entire country. I think I said that backwards. But, this is going to be a retooling effort here, given what Michigan State lost in the portal here. And really, we're talking about a defense that has not been particularly great under Mel Tucker the past 3 seasons. What do you see as Rossi bringing schematically to the defense that's differing from these past 3 renditions of the team?
I think versatility. I mean, Rossi, one of his specialties is the rush end position. If you guys don't know what that is, it's kind of like an outside linebacker defensive end hybrid. So you'll see three guys on the line. Sometimes you'll see 4 guys line up on the line. That rush end, ideally in his scheme, has that versatility to rush the passer, but also drop back in coverage, be athletic enough to cover a slot guy, cover a tight end. So that rush end position is going to be interesting to watch. He's developed a lot of decent rush ends. I think most notably the immediate one that pops into my head from Minnesota's Boye Mafe, who's now in the NFL. So he's developed some decent players at Minnesota. I thought he did a really good job with the Golden Gophers. I don't think PJ Fleck is as successful without Joe Rossi as he is with Joe Rossi. So I'm interested to see what Fleck does this year and what that Minnesota defense does this year. But I thought Rossi was a really good hire. I think this defense overall is going to be more downhill as opposed to. I think they're going to attack a lot more. They're going to try to penetrate a lot more on that defensive line, and whereas the last kind of defensive staff kind of preached, all right, let's just stay in our gaps and we'll let, I guess, the running backs come to us and we'll make the tackle once they come to us. Whereas this is probably a more aggressive defense. That their philosophy is limit explosive plays, create takeaways. Probably missing one of the other points, but kind of that theme of being aggressive, try to limit those explosive plays. And I think you're going to see a more downhill type defense. Now, personnel wise, they lost probably a little too much in the spring, especially on the interior. So, and I think we'll get into that in a bit, but we'll see how successful they are this year. I think the scheme's improved. I think the coaching's improved on the defensive side. So I do think they'll take a little bit of a step at least.
Is there a guy that we're looking at that might, for Michigan State, that's going to fit that rush D end that you're talking about?
Yeah, it's a position group of roughly 6 to 7 guys. Chris Bogle would be my guess to start. Had a little bit of experience at Florida, has been with Michigan State for, I believe it's his 3rd season now. So he's probably the top guy in that room right now. Another name, Jordan Hall's been getting a little bit of reps. He's mainly a linebacker, but he's been getting a little bit of reps with the rush ends. I'm interested to see what that is. That only in certain situations, maybe they play him there full time. We'll see. But yeah, there's a couple of different guys that you can expect to see there.
Going to question 5 here, and I guess this is that time we can talk about that defensive line is just absolutely gutted in the portal with the departures of Simeon Barlow and Derek Harmon from the interior defensive line, 2 of the better players in the Big Ten. How on earth are they going to go about replacing that lost production from those 2?
Well, the simple answer is there is no replacing, because you lost them in the spring, and there's only a select few guys you can choose from when you're dipping into that spring transfer portal. So yeah, you really can't replace the production of those 2. Harmon went to Oregon, Barrow went to Miami, so both kind of went to better teams, for the lack of a better term there. But I do think they did a decent enough job backfilling to where they'll be serviceable there. They added Ben Roberts from Oregon. They added Jalen Satchel from Old Dominion. They added Raquan Buckley from Nebraska. So they added a couple of guys on that interior to at least get bodies there. I think Roberts will probably play the most out of those transfers. Getting Alex Van Sumeren's back from injury, that's big. He's only played like 4 games in his college career. So he's kind of inexperienced, but kind of like Childs, coaching staff's kind of hopeful for him. They're excited to see him back on the field. So we'll see what he does this year. But Maverick Hansen, he's kind of that veteran leader. He's been at Michigan State since 2019. So he went through Mark D'Antonio's last season, went through that COVID season, went through the whole Mel Tucker era at Michigan State. Is now finishing up his final year of college with Jonathan Smith here. So he's been through it all at Michigan State. Maverick Hansen has. So he kind of acts as that veteran leader. You'll probably see him start. So yeah, they got guys there. I just, like I said, there's no replacing what Harmon and what Barrow brought to the table.
You just look like you were going to say something, Clinton. No, I was just going to make a comp. You're going to what?
I was just taking a breath.
Oh, no, I just because that's, you think, regardless of the team, if you take, if we're looking at, you take Mason, and granted, they're not as good of players as Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham, and that's no shot at them, but you take those 2 guys off of Michigan, and it's like, how good is this defense actually? So that's just going to be, that's not something that you like to see, especially in the spring, because, like you said, it's a really difficult spot to replace that. What, just given what's on this defense here, and knowing that this is year 1 of a new scheme and you don't have everything that you want from just a true talent standpoint yet, what do you just view as reasonable expectations for this defense this year?
Yeah, I think you'll see a more aggressive defense. I think you'll see more man coverage. I know Michigan State played a lot of zone recently, past few years. I think you'll see a little bit more man coverage. But yeah, reasonable expectations. In terms of a number, I do think top half in just in terms of total defense would be hopeful thinking, kind of wishful thinking. I think top 80, top 90 would be a little bit more reasonable. We'll see what happens, because again, there's so many transfers that it's so hard to predict. So many new faces, so many young guys as well. Even in the secondary, they have young guys who have actually a lot of experience because they've been forced into playing because of whether it be injuries or whatnot, or transfers. So they have experience in the secondary a little bit. With some of those young guys, plus adding on a little bit transfer portal guys there. So to me, I want to see a defense that's more aggressive, which I think we'll see. I want to see a defense that creates more takeaways, which I think we'll see as well. Now, it's hard to put a number on it where they'll finish in total defense, but I think if they're average defensively, I think that's a step forward. And again, it's going to take maybe a year or two more to get the talent necessary to make that big jump back to
Mhm.
where Michigan State was defensively under Mark D'Antonio.
And then too, just looking at some draft lists on some prospects on this defensive side, how do you see them kind of using that mid layer of the defense to potentially accomplish those goals? Looking at guys like, Cal Halliday and Wayne Matthews at linebacker, but also, you got Angelo Gross as that hybrid nickelback safety guy. That at least seems like a lot of tools in the middle of the defense that you can get a little creative with and try to confuse opposing offenses.
Yeah, like similar to the offense, Smith likes positional versatility, guys that can play multiple positions so they can kind of vary their looks when they line up. But Darius Snow's another guy that he can play and he's a linebacker, but he can also play in space, play the Sam, kind of play that nickel spot. So he's a guy that I think Michigan State's going to use a lot this year because again, like I said, they can line him up at linebacker, line him up at Sam. Secondary, Michigan State past, they typically lined up with 5 guys in the secondary there, 5 DBs. So there's a lot of guys with experience in that secondary, young guys with experience. So yeah, they have enough bodies to kind of vary it up to kind of show different looks. So I'm excited to see what Rossi really schemes up. And I do think there's depth at linebacker. Like I mentioned, Snow, you mentioned Halliday, Jordan Hall, Jordan Turner from the Wisconsin transfer, Wayne Matthews from Old Dominion. So there's guys with experience at the linebacker position. So they can throw a number of different bodies in there. And I think they got enough depth there to where I don't think there's going to be a huge drop off from the 1s to the 2s.
And you kind of alluded to the future a little bit, looking 1, 2, 3 years down the road. The Big Ten, and not just the Big Ten, but the college football landscape on the whole is changing with this conference realignment. Where do you think, or how do you think Michigan State fits in with this new Big Ten now that we've added?
Yeah, I think under Smith, I think Michigan State. Now, I don't think they'll ever be kind of a consistent Big Ten title contender to the likes of like Ohio State or what I think Oregon's going to be. I think Oregon's going to be consistently in that race. I don't think Michigan State is close. I think it's going to take a long time for Michigan State to get up to that level if they're ever going to get up to that level. But what I do think is more realistic for Michigan State is to kind of be what Oregon State was kind of in the Pac-12, be the team that no one wants to play. Because remember, Oregon State under Smith, no one wanted to play them, right? They were going to beat you up. They were physical, and they were a tough team to beat. I think Michigan State, I think they can be that in this new Big Ten. I mean, Ohio State. I mean, remember that 2015 game, Michigan State, Mark D'Antonio versus Ohio State in the Big Ten championship. So those Michigan State teams, I think Michigan State under Jonathan Smith can return to kind of what Mark D'Antonio did, create kind of like an underdog, blue collar mentality type of program that I think similar to what an Iowa is. Be it maybe like a second tier type team, but once in a while they have enough talent to go on this run and make the playoff, make a second round of the playoff, make a semifinal. So I think Smith and Michigan State got a bright future. It's going to take a few years, but I'm excited to see what he can do at Michigan State.
The Michigan State national discussion for me is always so fascinating because I feel like sometimes they get talked about as just this program that happens to exist in the Big Ten, that they're kind of that on that rung below the big boys, but they've done something that Penn State or Iowa has, or even USC now, since we're looping them in this, they've made a 4-team playoff, whereas these other programs haven't. So they have shown that, hey, if you have the right guy in place, you have the right set of circumstances, this is a program that you can do stuff with. There is financial support at this program. I mean, we saw it a couple years ago when they gave Mel Tucker an extension that arguably kicked off this madness of college coaches getting obscene amounts of money because you just got to keep up with the Joneses while Michigan State's giving this guaranteed contract. So we got to do that too, because otherwise someone else is going to come in and steal our coach. So it's one of those programs that you look at and it's like, well, what are the markers of what you need for a college football program? Well, you need proximity to talent. And I think, while Michigan at the high school level isn't exactly the most talent-rich state in the country, there's still good players coming out of Michigan, and you're right above Ohio. You can get these good quality Ohio players that don't, maybe aren't getting recruited by Ohio State, aren't getting recruited by Michigan. You have financial support. I mean, that's for sure, and that's a big one in today's day and age, particularly with kind of the changing landscape on how roster construction is going. And you need a coach who's committed to the build, and it seems like they have that guy in Jonathan Smith. So I'm really fascinated to see how this all comes together for the Spartans. And while it may not be, the most exciting season this year in the grand scheme of things, I do think there's a lot of good pieces in place here for this team to particularly make some noise. And I do want to finish this up with one more football related question here. And this is kind of a big picture on the season question for you, Brendan. Looking at that over under win total for Michigan this year, they're sitting smack dab at 5. So for the Spartans to be a bowl team this year with 6 wins or better, what has to go right, knowing that they have a hellacious stretch right in the middle of the schedule against Ohio State, at Oregon, Iowa, and at Michigan, staring them down in that middle third of the season?
Yeah, to me, I kind of break up the schedule into 3 different pieces. First 4 games, I think you got to win 3. I think you got 2 gimmies against Florida Atlantic, against Prairie View A&M. You got to win those. And then the other 2 games in that stretch are at Maryland and at Boston College. Got to win at least one. To me, to reach bowl eligibility, got to go at least 3-1 there in that 4-game stretch. Because how I see it is, I don't think you can depend on a win in those next 4 games, because you got might be out of order here, but you got Ohio State, you got Oregon, you got Iowa, and Michigan. I mean, that is going to be absolutely brutal. And you just pray that you come out of those games healthy. Like we touched on, the depth is a little bit of a concern. Offensive line, interior, that defensive line. So to me, coming out healthy after those 4 games is going to be huge, because you got some winnable games in those last 4. I think, again, it might be out of order here, but you got Rutgers, Purdue, Indiana, and then there's another team I'm missing in there. Illinois is the other team. So you got, to me, 2, 3, maybe even all 4 of those are probably winnable games. So again, probably need to go at least 3-1 there. So if you go at least 3-1 in those first 4 games, at least 3-1 in those last 4 games, you got yourself a bowl game.
It's just this whole like middle portion of the Big Ten is so fascinating to me, because I think we can all agree at the top of the conference we're going to have some variation of Oregon, Ohio State, Penn State, and then probably Michigan, maybe at or a tier below those 4 teams. And then USC, Iowa, Wisconsin, maybe in that second-ish tier. But after that, if I'm doing math in my head, that's like 11 teams where it's just, I could buy anything. So it's kind of one of those things, like looking at this Michigan State schedule. It's like, well, it depends a lot on how you feel about the Spartans, but it also depends kind of on how you feel about Maryland and what, you're getting them at a pretty good point in their schedule, given what they're replacing on offense. And, how do you feel about Indiana and all that they added in the transfer portal? And I mean, by the time those 2 teams play, we'll have a pretty good idea on how both of them are looking. But you're absolutely right. Like those, that first third and that last third of the season for Michigan State, you're looking at 8 games that are certainly all winnable. I mean, they're certainly all losable, but there's just so much variance that can happen just given what these rosters are looking like. And that's not even factoring in just kind of that attrition that you're going to get throughout the season.
And you don't even know like what teams are just going to pop on the radar all of a sudden. Like what if Rutgers is just really good for whatever reason? What if Maryland's really good this season? Like we're not factoring that in. But also on the flip side, Rutgers could be really bad. Indiana could be really bad with all the transfers they got. Maybe chemistry's not there yet, or it's first-year head coach. Maybe the scheme's not it's fully installed yet, or whatnot. But there's still a lot of unknowns, and with the 18-team conference, there's so many question marks. And outside of those top 4 teams, Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State, maybe I might even include Michigan in the teams that have just a bunch of question marks. Like have question marks, Wisconsin, Michigan, USC is defensively, Washington with all that they're replacing. So. Big Ten, it's gonna be really interesting to see. Honestly, I'm a little bit more interested in kind of the middle of the pack. Well, what order those teams finish in, maybe more so than I am who plays for a conference championship. I know that might be wild to say, but it's so unpredictable.
Listen, I think there's so much unpredictability too that there's going to be 1 or 2 just absolutely insane upsets this year that nobody sees coming. And the funny thing is it won't matter because the playoff is still expanded and someone can go 10-2 and still backdoor their way in. But anyway, thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Yeah, right. No kidding.
What is we've talked about coach expectation and the particular win-loss total here. What's the fan expectation for this team this year. I know Michigan State, you mentioned the D'Antonio years, that they're more than just a bowl caliber program. Like they could push and they compete. So what's the fan expectation like going into this season?
Well, I want to cut out like the radical top 5% that think this team should be 10-2, because I don't think the talent is up to 10-2 quality of a team here. But I think most Michigan State fans have kind of a reasonable expectation, because I think a lot of Michigan State fans like the Jonathan Smith hire, so they're willing to give him a little bit of time, recognize kind of the disaster that was Mel Tucker the last couple of years. So I think fans are willing to give Jonathan Smith a little bit of time. So I think as long as Michigan State, I think a bowl game, to me, is what I've gauged from the fan base is a bowl game, I think would be a success this year. Winning season, even better. Again, that's a little bit over that preseason win total that you'll see at sports books, but I think it's a realistic expectation to make a bowl game. I think a lot of the fans kind of agree with that.
Also, will they be running out the ugliest uniforms in college football this year? With the is that gold or yellow state across the front of them?
God, I hope not.
I think it's lime green.
The neon green. I hope.
Yeah.
Not. Those.
Oof.
Like I like a lot of college teams' uniforms. I'm not like super picky about them, but those not good. Not good at all.
Yeah. The green, the light green on darker green. I don't know how I feel about that.
You guys think it's weird. View it from a colorblind person's perspective. It's an atrocity. And if it's ugly to me, it has to be ugly to everyone else. That's all I'm saying.
Wait, so Clinton,
can you tell? I labeled it. Well, I labeled it as gold, so you couldn't even tell that I knew that it was neon green or lime green. Anyways,
can you read the banner behind you?
It says inside the pylon.
Yeah, like what does that? Does that look okay? Because there was once.
That's an unfair question because I know what our colors are for the podcast. So
okay,
I'm gonna be able to tell you what that is.
So Brandon, Clinton is like green orange colorblind, and
I'm everything colorblind.
Well, I made a graphic a couple months ago, and it was a green background with orange text on it because I'm like, oh, well, those are the colors of our logo. This will look cool. And I sent it to him, and he's like, I can't. There's nothing on this page. I'm like, oh no, didn't even think about it.
I just can't wrap my head around like being colorblind. Like it's just something that I don't think of every day. So it's just weird to me that that like people live like that. Like you just can't see different colors. Like I had a buddy in high school who I forgot what colors he couldn't see, but he was also part colorblind. So I don't know. It's just weird to me, and I never think about it. So.
Yep.
No.
So I usually tell a lot of people because I've done the corrective lenses for it. I had a cousin who used to work in opticianry, and he had me come in and try it out. And I scored like, I don't know, in the colorblind book, like 14 out of 24 or something. And we put the corrective lenses on, and I scored 24 out of 24. And it was like an epiphany, man. I was like, holy shit. This is what purple looks like? How do I know?
This is what you guys see. Well, that's just amazing.
Like, how does my brain that can't fully perceive that now, I put glasses on and can automatically perceive that's purple and that's pink and that's yellow. Like I had to look at this thing like it was a baseball stadium of fans full of different colors, and I was like, holy cow, like that's purple, that's magenta. I'm like, how the hell do I know what that is? I don't know what that is. And so my biggest description for you guys who aren't colorblind is how I see things, it's very dull compared to what you guys see. So if something's bright yellow to me, it is probably off the charts bright to you guys. I have a bright Under Armour hoodie and bright Nike shorts, and I walked out once, and my wife's like, "You're a human highlighter. What are you doing?" And I was like, "I didn't look that bright to me." And she's like, "No, you are a highlighter right now, Clinton. Like, change at least one part of that outfit." I was like, "All right, whatever."
I always picture. Like when I think it, like if I was colorblind, I'd picture like everything just being like black and white, like old like 1950s TV. Like, is that what it is?
No, there are, I believe, some people out there that are kind of that way. I had a teacher in high school who told us was colorblind, and he said, if you write in anything other than like a pencil, which is dark, or red, black, or blue ink, I will fail you because I can't see it. It will disappear.
Wow. And
his eyes were even like very different. And he's one of my favorite teachers of all time, but that is the most extreme I've heard of like a human being colorblind. Like he's like, if you write in anything other than dark, I can't see it and I'll fail you because there's nothing on your tests. I was like, okay. Mine, I call it more like color deficient. I think that's the thing. You hear color blind, so you think like I can't see color at all. Like we see it. It's just really hard to discern on certain things. Mine, if there are extremes between, I usually do okay. But if you're on the border of like anything, like man, I've confused red and black before, and it's like, how did you do that? Like I don't know.
Wow,
it's a weird thing, and to be able to put lenses or contacts on and just automatically solve that's pretty freaky. Really cool that the body can do that, but freaky. All right, so enough side tangent about.
I'm gonna think about this the rest of the evening.
That was a good conversation. I like that.
I think I might have nightmares about this tonight.
Ryan, I expect a 2-page report from you tomorrow morning on color blindness.
Well, I will be awake at 5 a.m., so I'll have that to your inbox by 7:30.
Well, just so people know, you get it from your mother, not your father. There's a misconception that, well, your dad must be colorblind. Like, no, you have to get it from your mother. If you're a boy, it's carried on the X. It comes from your mom. So there's your tidbit of information for the day.
There you go, guys. Michigan State football and Punnett squares. That's what we learned about tonight.
All right, Brendan. Well, we have one more fun question for you tonight that we've asked every beat writer on the show. What is the best pizza on or around Michigan State's campus?
Ooh. The one I typically go to is Pizza House. It is pretty like right across the street from campus. They have Chicago style there, deep dish. I'm not a big Chicago style guy myself, so I get the deep dish, just a square deep dish. Mm-hmm. But yeah, solid pizza. Yeah, I go there fairly often, so I'll give the nod to Pizza House.
If it's anything like the Pizza House in Ann Arbor, I can confirm it's really good.
It's the exact same company. So
bingo. Can confirm Pizza House is excellent.
We have a Pizza House in Columbus that is not the same as those. I guarantee it, because it's a one-stop mom and pop, but also very good. So maybe it's the name Pizza House. If you got a Pizza House name, you must be pretty damn good, right?
It has to be good. It's science.
Are there particular toppings you would tell us to get if we go there?
I'm just an old-fashioned pepperoni guy, but honestly,
there we go.
Anything on my pizza. I'm a big proponent of Hawaiian pizza. I love pineapple on my pizza. You can call me weird, you can call me whatever you want, but I'm a big proponent of it. I think pineapple is the second best pizza topping.
Interesting.
Spicy.
Interesting. Wow, that was a hot take.
Not a spicy or hot take, it's more like a sweet take. I don't know.
That's fair enough. I'm just not a big pineapple guy, so I can't hate on that. I'm sure I would, if I liked pineapple, I would like it, but I'm not a big pineapple guy. Before we let you get out of here, Brendan, we'll stop torturing you with colorblind talk. Let our listeners know where they can find your work and what you're working on here over the next couple of weeks as we head into the home stretch of fall camp with the season now less than 3 weeks away.
Yeah, at SpartansIllustrated.com. Check that out. We're covering fall camp. Obviously, we'll have coverage during the season as well, so a lot of Michigan State football content to come there. SpartansIllustrated.com. Greatly appreciate if you guys become a subscriber as well. That would help support us. We're also offering 75% off right now of a full year subscription. And also, you can follow me on Twitter at BMoreCFB. I try to talk a little bit about Michigan State, a little bit about just college football in general as well. So if you just like talking about college football, you can check me out on Twitter at BMoreCFB.
All right, sir. Well, we appreciate you making some time for us this evening. It was very insightful, and I think we learned a lot tonight for Michigan State heading into 2024. Everyone, thank you once again for joining in this evening and for putting up with my passed out dog over my right shoulder here. We will be back tomorrow night. We are talking the other team in Michigan tomorrow night, the defending national champion Michigan Wolverines. You won't want to miss that one. We have 4 episodes coming to you this week, so make sure you are subscribed to that feed in Apple or Spotify so you can get notified in the morning when these drop for you. Thanks, everyone, for stopping in again. We'll see you tomorrow.
See you.